So we're going to be talking about world domination, which is really just who took over who throughout history. Okay, so this is a little bit partly a history lesson, but we got to tie it into geography because it's important with how our borders and our boundaries were created. Remember, think on, what day was that? Wednesday, we did our notes about different boundary types. We looked at natural and artificial borders, right? Natural borders involved what 3 types? Rivers, mountains, and deserts, right? And then our artificial borders, we had what types? Longitude and latitude is what classification? Geometric, right? And then we had political and cultural, right? So those were the 6 different boundary types that we looked at the other day. But now we kind of need to see how those lines were drawn. We talked a little bit the other day about Africa, and we drew those as some examples of types of boundaries. And so that's really where we're going to talk a lot today about domination and who took over who. All right, so we're going to start with the who over here. We're going to talk about who, what, when, how, and why. All right, those are going to be our 6 main sections that we're going to talk about. So make sure that you are able to write all of that. If you're writing it down on your desk or on your sheet of paper or whatever, we're going to talk about the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, and the why. Okay, so the first is the who. The who. So, the European countries are really going to be the ones who are going to settle other places. Okay, they're going to be the colonizers. So they had the colonies. Right? Because if you think about it in history, Europe was the ones, they kind of had the first big power when you think about it. They have really powerful empires, and they have the longest kind of running history, okay? So they became pretty powerful, and they began having colonies in other places of the world because they go and start to exploit or use other countries based on on different things, mostly for resources, okay? So they're really going to settle in Africa and in Asia. In Africa and Asia especially. They are going to gain independence in the 18th and 19th century. What is the 18th and 19th century? 1700s and 1800s, okay? So, independence from these colonies in 17 or 1800s. Okay? Oh, you can't see that. All right, so that's going to be the who. The dominators are going to be the European countries. The lesser people, the ones who are going to get bullied, you could say, those are the African and Asian countries, okay? That's pretty much all I need to know for the who. The what. Let's write the what. That's next. Let's do that color. The what? There's 2 different things. Sometimes these words can be used interchangeably, but they're kind of different. Okay, so imperialism. That's going to be when a country moves in, like a colonizer, like the dominator is going to move into a territory that already has people there. Okay, so this, if you want to write that word for word, that's up on the screen, that's fine. But it's really just when a country moves in to dominate when the territory already has people there. Who is that squeaking? Already has people there. Okay. So imperialism, people are living there, and the Europeans said, I don't care if there's already people there. They've already settled that land. I'm going to go because I'm stronger, and I have more resources, or I have more power. So I'm just going to go in and take whatever I want. So that's really what happened in Africa, right? Because we already know from the other day when we talked about it that there are a lot of different nations, right? Remember, nations means groups of people, right? So there's a lot of different groups of people and tribes and cultural groups and ethnicities living in Africa. But when the Europeans go and overtake it, that's imperialism because people are already there. Okay, the difference now is with colonialism. So I'm going to choose a different color for colonialism because they're different things. Let's go purple. So colonialism is then when a group moves in to dominate, but there's either not a whole lot of people there or there's no people there at all. Okay, so this is when a group moves in to take control, but there's not people there, or it's sparsely inhabited, so not a lot of people there. Okay, but not a lot of peeps there, or none at all. Go ahead and box those words. You need to know what those are. That's what we're really talking about here. Imperialism and colonialism. Okay. So what would be a really good example of colonialism? Moving in when there's not a whole lot of people there. What did you learn about last year? Yeah, the U.S. colonialism, right? Sure, there were Native Americans here, but there weren't a whole lot like there were in Africa, okay? So when Great Britain came to settle the North American lands, right, because it wasn't the U.S. yet, that's colonialism, because there weren't a whole lot of, yes, there were Native Americans here, but there weren't a whole lot of them. So it's sparsely inhabited, okay? They were in pockets of groups, and they were kind of spread out, but when the British came, that is an example of colonialism, okay? So the difference there is, were there people already there, or were there not? Okay, that's going to be the difference between imperialism and colonialism, okay? All right, the next part, can I move on? Do you have this all written down? Okay, the next part is the win. Let's talk about the win. The win, imperialism. Oh, I need to change my slide over here. Oh, it's already changed. Great. Okay, so the win. Imperialism. Since I did imperialism first up during the what, I'm going to do imperialism again. So imperialism is going to happen later in history, in the 1800s to about the 1920s. Okay, but colonialism is going to happen before that. That's going to be like 1400s, right? Who sailed to the ocean blue in 1492? Christopher Columbus, right? So that is really going to be mostly in like the Western Hemisphere, which is like, if you're looking at our map over here, it's going to be on the left side, okay, to the west of the Atlantic over there. So North America, Central America, South America, that's going to be colonialism, okay? When the first explorers started taking off in their boats, they went west because where did they think they were going to end up? Asia. They thought they were going to end up in Asia because they had no idea that North and South America were sitting there, okay? So the Western Hemisphere kind of got colonized first, okay? Christopher Columbus set off, and then North America happened, right, with the British taking over. So our first colonies, remember, think back to Unit 2 when we know that there's not a very large population in the world at this time. So everything is very sparsely inhabited, or this land is pretty much like unsettled for the most part. That's going to be colonies over in North America, Latin America, South America, okay? So that's going to happen first, is colonialism. Then as time goes on, when the Europeans start gaining more power, then imperialism is really going to start. And with imperialism, that is a perfect example of Africa, okay? They started going now to this half of the world over here, right? They started breaking up all of this stuff. So they went to Africa and cut up all of Africa, right? Like I talked about the other day. So that's imperialism, because there were already people here living in Africa, right? All the tribal groups. And so when the Europeans came in, that's imperialism. There were already a lot of people in South Asia and Southeast Asia, right? Because Great Britain is going to settle India. And then there's a lot of European powers that are going to split up all of this stuff over here, okay, in Southeast Asia. That's called imperialism, right? When people are already there. All right, so that's going to happen later in history, like in the 1800s, early 1900s, okay? That's when Great Britain really is going to be our powerhouse colonizer. They're going to, have you ever heard that saying that said the sun never sets on the British Empire? Okay, you'll probably hear about that next year in world history, and that's because Great Britain had so many colonies all over the world that at some point there was sunshine on one of their territories, right? Because of how the world rotates, right? Somewhere it was daytime on one of the British territories, okay? So that's how much land they had, that's how many colonies they had, because they were so vast, spread across the world, okay? So Great Britain is going to be a powerhouse, and they're going to, at first it's called colonization, and then later when they go in and there's more people there, that's going to be imperialism, okay? So before it was colonialism, and then later in history it turns into imperialism, okay? So that's the when. The next one we have is the where, all right? So this goes along with a lot of what I was just saying. Let's go ahead and write this out. I posted this picture specifically on Classroom with this PowerPoint because what I want you to do is to save this picture and add it onto your Padlet. So that way you can have a visual of what imperialism and colonialism looked like. Okay, so the where is going to be mostly in Africa and in Asia. Okay. And I want you to go ahead and write down in parentheses or in brackets, add map to Padlet, just so that you remember. All right, so whenever you read that, this entry better have your notes and the map, okay? Let's look at this map a little bit closer. Here's the map. What color was Great Britain? That what we were just talking about? Green. Yeah, the United Kingdom, right? Look at how many green territories there were. We have Australia. Anyone know what Australia started out as? A prison colony. I think we've talked about that before because Great Britain was so small. They started sending all of their prisoners, kicking them off of their little island over here in Europe and shipping them over to Australia. It started out as a prison colony, okay? They had India and a lot of Southeast Asia over here. They had Southern Africa, Northern Africa, that's Sudan and Egypt. There's Europe, or UK, of course. They had a little bit of South America, a piece in Latin America, and they had Canada. Okay, so it's huge, right? So if you think about it, truly, one of their pieces of territory is probably stretches out into every time zone, right? So that's why they said that the sun never set on the British territory, okay, on the British Empire, okay? What's another color that you see a lot of? Blue. Who was blue? The light blue? France, right? France had a lot of Africa, right? Look at all the light blue colors there in Africa. Where else are they located? What part of Asia? Southeast Asia, right? They had a lot of that Southeast Asia corner over here. And they have a little bit in South America too, right? What's another color that we see? Purple, right? They have all of freaking Russia, okay? And we know all of the stands that we just drew too, right? On our sketch map. So Russia had all of those countries and a lot of Eastern Europe, right? What's this orange color? The Ottoman Empire, okay? That's going to eventually become Turkey, okay? And they had a lot of the Middle East there. Belgium, which is a really tiny country up here next to France and Germany. Remember drawing it last week on our sketch map, okay? Belgium is really tiny, but look at this huge chunk of land in the middle of Africa. Okay, they had a huge territory in the middle of Africa. That's the Democratic Republic of the Congo today, currently. Okay, who is this yellow? Germany, yeah. So they're going to have Germany and Poland and then several places down here in Africa. Okay, so I want you to save this map. Truly, I took a picture of this map. You're just going to save it and put it on your Padlet too. Okay, so this is kind of a map of how everything was split up. Japan, notice Japan over here is going to have a lot of East Asia too. They have the Korean Peninsula over there and what is now a part of Russia up there. Okay, all right, next piece of this, we're going to do the how. All right, so let's write down how. All right, the how. The how is going to happen in 4 different kind of chunks. Okay, the first one is language, that we're really going to see how imperialism and colonialism is going to affect the world, right? If we look over at this slide, this one is specifically about language. What do you notice about these 10 most influential languages in the world? That's currently, today. Those are the top 10 languages of the world. What do you notice? Linking it back to imperialism. Yeah, it's all the people who colonized them, right? That's what Zach just said, for the most part, right? You have English, that was in the UK. French was in France. Spanish was from Spain. Russian, obviously. Arabic was going to be spoken in the Ottoman Empire. That was the orange color on that map. Okay. German from Germany. Japanese. Portuguese was from Portugal. And Portugal had settled Brazil. So in Brazil, they speak Portuguese, right? So that's 8 out of the 10 right there that had major colonies, right? The Chinese wasn't really on that map, and Hindi and Urdu, not really, okay? But if we're looking at language, they're going to have 8 of the 10 listed here are from major world colonizers. right? So if these people were going to settle other lands, these are still the languages that are being spoken today, hundreds of years later, right? We're speaking English right now because the British settled here in the U.S., right? They colonized the U.S. That's why we're speaking English, right? And English is still the most dominant languages, right, for use of business and whatever. I've told you the story that whenever I lived in Austria, the 20 different nationalities of people in my class, and our common denominator was English. That's the one language that everybody knew, right? So that's thanks to Great Britain, okay? Another way they settle people is through political reasons or political ways, okay? So for the most part, the more people a place had, the more power they could get out of it, okay? So the European colonizers, or I guess when it became imperialism, they would go to these colonies, and it kind of worked hand in hand with economics. We can write economics under here too. Okay, so the more people there were for political reasons, the more power they could keep gaining off of those people, okay? So they would colonize those countries. Let me scoot down to the economic one too, okay? So the way this kind of worked is that the Europeans went in and settled Africa because they wanted those raw materials. They wanted those resources, the what's the word I'm looking for? Minerals and deposits of diamonds and all of that stuff, because they wanted to go in and take all of that from Africa, okay? And so they kind of exploited them. Europe, let's say France went in and took these diamonds or whatever from whatever country in Africa, and then they would make them, they would set up their let's say their diamond factory, right? And then France would get all of the benefits from that. They would get the proceeds of that, right? All of the money would go back to France, but then it also allowed them to sell that stuff back to Africa or to that colony, which is kind of messed up because that's where the diamond was coming from, right? It's like saying, what's an example? Matthew, I would come into your room, take your, what's your favorite thing in your room right now? Your Fortnite. Okay, your whatever gaming system, right? I'm going to take your gaming system because I'm colonizing your room and your house. So that gaming system is now mine, but now I'm going to charge you to play whatever Fortnite on it. Doesn't that suck, right? Because it was yours to begin with, but now since I'm colonizing your place, now you have to pay me to use that. Isn't that kind of messed up?
You gotta pay to get those dubs, Matthew.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so it's kind of twisted, and it was truly like a sense of bullying, right? Because the Europeans had more power, so they're just going to move in, take what wasn't theirs, but then charge those people to buy it back or whatever the case was. Okay, so it's kind of twisted. So with economics, they wanted to use their raw materials. Yes, to manufacture, right, because they're LDCs. And then it gave them a place to sell their goods. So those colonizers were the ones who were controlling the economy. All right, and then the last one was by religion. That's another way how they colonized. Ooh. So most of Europe was what religion?
Asian.
Christian, right? Yeah, they were Christian. Christians in Europe, right? So what were the 3 G's that you learned about last year? Why did people go?
God and glory.
Gold, God, and glory, right? So when they talk about the God part, they were sending out missionaries, okay? They wanted to get into new colonies and push their religion on other people. Okay, so they were sending out missionaries to spread their religion. Remember drawing all of our Christian arrows on that map before the break from Unit 3? We drew whatever color we used, and there was like a ton of them, right? We drew it over to North America, we drew it down to South America, we drew it to Africa, and to India, and to Australia, right? Because the Europeans were taking over all those places, so they were pushing Christianity everywhere, okay? Everywhere, yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, and the last thing we're going to talk about is the why. Why did they colonize? Kind of goes along with the how a little bit. There are 6 different reasons. Number 1. Oops. Number 1 was that this was outlets. You can write that down right there. It says outlets for population. What does outlets for population mean?
Why? Did that say why?
Yes.
Yes. Outlets for population. Zach, what did you say? Yeah, you could put people there, right? They could send their people to these colonies. For whatever reason, right? With the 13 colonies, right? The North American colonies, people wanted to have freedom of religion, right? They wanted to come over and start their own colonies. There was a Irish potato famine and people started immigrating, right? If things weren't going well in their country for whatever reasons, these colonies gave those groups of people a way out to go to still be a part of their country, right? Their home country, their government would still be the same because it's just a territory, but they could go to this new place and kind of start over, start a new place. Okay, so it would be an outlet for their population to go to. The second reason is that they wanted to be self-sufficient. What does self-sufficient mean? Yeah, you can do everything you need to do by yourself. By yourself. You don't need anyone else anymore. You don't really have to trade because you can make everything and support yourself, okay? Let me write that. You can support yourself here. So in the case of Europe and Africa, Europe ran out of a lot of their resources, so they started going down to Africa to exploit them. And if they made them their territory, then they weren't going to have to trade with the tribes anymore, or they wouldn't have to trade with the tribes because they owned the tribes now, right? They went in and bullied them, and now, oh, that's my land, so I don't have to pay you at all. I'm just going to take the resources that are on your land, right? And I'm not going to have to pay you. So in that way, now I'm self-sufficient because now I can make whatever I need to make with these materials and I don't have to pay for it. Now I can charge you to buy it, even though that's twisted. That's really how it happened, okay? Number 3. Need for new markets. What does that mean? What is a market? Yeah, the place that you sell stuff to, right? So, now that I went in and took your gaming system, Matthew, from your room because I'm colonizing your room, now if I make you pay for it, now that's another way I can make money off of you, right? So you're the market that I'm selling to now, right? So that's the same thing with Africa. It gave them more people to sell things to, okay? We'll say that they sell the goods back to their colonies.
What if I didn't so I didn't pay you anymore, would you still would you be mad?
Then you would die if you didn't have Fortnite, right?
No.
Because essentially, if you didn't have these things in Africa, you were kind of like blackmailed into it. Is really kind of what it was. It's truly a sense of like bully, like you're the bully and the being bullied, right?
What if like I didn't use the thing that you made me pay for, and then I used my brother's computer instead?
Then she'll take your brother's computer.
Well, your brother is another nation if we're going with our Africa example, right? Remember, our nations in Africa don't get along. So in this example, you don't get along with your brother. He doesn't like you, so he won't let you use Fortnite on his computer.
He never liked me anyway.
All right, the fourth one is missionaries. Like we just talked about, it spread their religion. That was why. That was another reason why colonies wanted to spread, is because they wanted to spread Christianity to other places of the world that they knew wouldn't know about Christianity. Okay? 5, what is the white man's burden? Have you heard that before? Think about it. What is a white man's burden? Kind of. Go along that lines, Colin, along with slavery.
Well, wouldn't they take other countries so they can have slaves without having to buy them from other nations?
I see where you're going with that. No, in this case, the white man's burden is like, hey, I'm rich, I'm white, I know that I'm more powerful than, or I have more opportunities than the African tribe. So I'm going to go in there, 1, spread my religion, and 2, because I feel like I need to help them, because I know that I'm rich and they're poor. Okay, so it's kind of like the guilt of knowing that you have more, and feeling like they have to go help those African tribes or the Southeast Asian colonies too, because those were LDCs in poor countries too. Okay, so it's this feeling, like they feel the need to help others who are less fortunate. Others less fortunate. June. And what did we talk about with nationalism the other day? What is nationalism?
Is this the last one?
Yes, it is. Pride for your country, right? So when these countries started expanding and spreading to other countries, it gave them more pride in their country, because they were like, yeah, my country's growing, my country's the biggest, now we have all these resources, we can make more money now, and this is really going to unite us, right? A centripetal force that's positive, and now we're being united because we're growing so much, and we know that we're becoming more powerful. Okay, so that united the French, or it united the British, because they had this pride in expanding. Okay? Makes sense? Are there any questions? All right, so that is, in a nutshell, imperialism and colonialism. All right?